And we're super happy he's on his way down to Mom's basement. Have a seat, man. Adam Nash is here. How are you?
Good. Great to be here.
Super happy to have you. You know, before we get into the mechanics, why are donor advised funds exploding in popularity? You know, you and I talked ahead of time that, you know, these have been around forever, but now I feel like finally we're hearing about donor advised funds. Is this a money nerd trend, Adam, or is there something bigger going on?
No, there's two reasons really that I think donor advised funds are exploding in popularity, you know, going from thousands of accounts to millions. And they're the best reasons of all. First and foremost is that a huge number of Americans give to charity every year. A lot of us support a religious institution, our kids' school, our alma mater, a cause we believe in. Most estimates are that between 50 to 60 million American households give to charity every year. And so not surprisingly, that's a money issue, right? That's money coming out of everyone's budget every year, and yet most people don't budget for it. And it just turns out that the second reason is that, you know, in general, it turns out Americans really like tax-advantaged accounts. Like we spent 50 years talking about Ks and IRAs. And, you know, 25 years ago, we're talking about 529 plans to save for college. And so most people, when they find out, hey, there's a tax-advantaged account for charitable giving, most people are like, oh, tell me more. Why didn't someone tell me that this thing exists? And so I think what you're seeing now is that we're just hitting that knee of the curve that those other accounts kind of hit, where more and more people are hearing about it. The big guys, the Fidelities, the Schwabs, the Vanguards are talking about it more. And so I think we're all just getting educated about this great way to put money aside for charity.
Well, I'm so happy that you were available to walk through the 101 on donor advised funds. So let's just pretend that you're my buddy and we're at a neighborhood cookout. What is a donor advised fund while we're grilling the steaks?
Yeah, I appreciate that. And also, I do appreciate invites to cookouts like that, because since I like and love to talk about these financial topics, I'm not always the best guest at the cookout, but, you know, I love this stuff. I can't help it. But yeah, no, if you're asking me, I would just say, like, you know, if you're the type of person who gives to charity on a regular basis, you have organizations, it's really useful to have one place for all your giving, right? We have separate accounts for different things. There's a reason why we set up a separate account for our long-term savings or an emergency fund, or a separate account for retirement, or even for college savings. And so that's all a donor advised fund is it turns out there's an account designed for giving to charity. And it's a really useful thing because you put money aside when it's convenient for you, right? You know, most of us, you know, there's ups and downs in our budgets. There's ups and downs in our income and expenses, et cetera. And so, but we like to support organizations on a regular basis. And so putting money aside when it's convenient for you, having that money invested tax-free, and then when you want to give, just having it being a few taps on your phone or a few clicks with your mouse is just amazingly convenient. And I mean, the best part of the donor advised fund is that when you put money into the account, you get the charitable deduction right away.
Well, let's dive into, can we dive into that first?
Sure,
the tax advantage, because we got a bunch of our stackers that when you start, and you mentioned this earlier, right? We love giving to these tax sheltered plans. So walk me through the tax benefits of putting money into a donor advised fund.
Happy to. If you happen to be an investor who owns things like stocks or even exotic things like crypto, when you donate stock or crypto, you get this extra benefit where you never end up paying the capital gains taxes, but you get the charitable deduction for the full market value, as long as you've held the investment at least 1 year. So if you were lucky enough to buy Apple stock at $100 a share, and now it's $200 a share a few years later, when you put a share of Apple into a donor advised fund, you get a charitable deduction on your taxes for $200. And you'll never pay the capital gains taxes on that run from 100 to 200. So it's really kind of a no-brainer. If you give to charity regularly, you should have a donor advised fund.
Here in Texarkana, Texas, a little town I live in, Adam, I help build walking trails, and it's a 501c3. And I was thinking that very question, like we're a bunch of volunteers. Like we have a budget of almost nothing. If somebody wanted to give us stock, like how the hell am I going to do that? But you take care of that.
That's right. Exactly. And in fact, as the number of instruments grows and techniques, there's huge advantage. I mean, donor advised funds like Daffy, you can link your bank account. If you just want to move money over without any fees, you can, of course, use a card. I mean, we even accept Apple Pay. But for a lot of investors, if you invest and you've been doing it the right way for the long term, you end up with these investments after 10, 20, 30 years that have significant capital gains.
Sure.
And we don't think about that. But the truth is, when you cash it in, the government gets paid. Like, you're going to pay those taxes. And in some states, those taxes can be quite high. I mean, I live in California. It's, between state and federal, you can be over 50% in some cases.
Right. Yeah.
And so if you want to see your money go to a good cause, the ability to actually donate stock or an ETF, it could be, can be Vanguard Total Market. It doesn't have to be, NVIDIA or, some hot stock in the market. The only problem with it is that, it can sometimes be a timing thing. It can sometimes be the organization doesn't support it. But the great thing about donor advised funds is that it takes both of those problems off the table. Right.
Gotcha.
So you give it when it's convenient for you. You could be working with your accountant if you do your taxes yourself, et cetera. But if you're sitting there thinking like, hey, I normally give a certain amount to charity every year, it just becomes another thing for you, another financial goal, right? To make sure that you're funding. And actually, we see a lot of our members actually use it that way. We actually encourage our members to actually set a goal, to actually look back. What did you give to charity last year? The year before? Most of us actually don't even know the answer to that question. And the good news is actually most of us are more generous than we think we are, because we do these donations one at a time when people ask. But if you turn it into a basic financial goal, you have a number on it, then you can plan for it, right? And actually using appreciated stock, ETFs, mutual funds, crypto turns out to be a very tax smart way to kind of fund that goal.
I love the gamification of it, right? Let's see if I can beat last year. And that sounds like fun for the family. How can we as a family maybe even give more than we did last year? But second, I also like the fact that then it becomes part of the overall budget. You think about it. I've just found in my life, the more I give, the more I get. It just, how does the universe make that? But I have no idea. But the more I give away, the more I feel like the universe gives it back to me. I sound way more woo-woo there than I am, but it's just been true. I want to ask a procedural question because I haven't been a financial planner for a long time. 15 years. But 15 years ago, this deal that I would have this stock or this fund sitting at Vanguard, Fidelity, Schwab, wherever, and now I'm going to give it to a charity. The whole ACAT transfer thing, the account transfer thing of getting this share of stock from this custodian over to Daffy or whoever was a real pain in the ass. I got to believe, you being a guy that's between finance nerd and tech nerd, Adam, you must have picked the lock on how to make this much easier.
Yeah, well, I'd like to think that we have made it easier, but unfortunately, I've been in this industry long enough to tell you it is not. I still want it to be faster. Like we just rolled out a new version of that this year, but we're always working on that problem.
Maybe that's where all our gray came from, though, Adam.
Exactly. Well, the biggest myth out there, and it's not unique to donor advised funds, but it's very heavy in the category, is that we've just in the last 10 or 20 years become very fixated on the wealthy and the ultra wealthy. It's the billionaire focus. And so I think there's this misperception that if you're not a billionaire, that the donor advised fund isn't for you. And nothing could be further from the truth. It turns out all the research actually shows most of the giving in this country is actually just from individuals, people like you and me. Like I said, those 50 to 60 million American households who are very generous and believe that some of their money, hard-earned money, is not just for them, it's to actually support others, right? That old-fashioned idea of helping people less fortunate than yourselves is still very universal. And so the idea of having a donor advised fund is just a smart money thing of having this separate account for your giving. I think the myth that I see about donor advised funds is that somehow it's incredibly difficult, right, or sophisticated. Like if you don't have a professional financial advisor, it's not something you could do. But it isn't, right? Most of our members, they open up an account, they fill in their information. I mean, Daffy is free under $100 and it's only $3 a month otherwise. Setting up an account there was a time where setting up a bank account was a whole arduous journey, but that was solved online 20 years ago. People open up accounts online all the time now. There's nothing super difficult about having a donor advised fund. You just have to know that they exist and actually take a few minutes to do it. And from our perspective, our mission is to help people be more generous more often. It turns out, I teach this class at Stanford in personal finance, and I actually start the class with behavioral finance, all the emotions.
My favorite part.
Yeah,
by far my favorite part.
And it turns out that, the same reason why if you want to save for retirement well, right, you want that money coming out of your paycheck automatically. You make that smart decision once and then you automate it. It turns out the same research that shows why that works for retirement also applies to giving. It turns out if you just set a number, whatever the number is, no judgment, everyone's different on how much they can and how much they think they should give, but just picking a number and automating it turns out to lead people to be more generous. In fact, the research says that people who pre-commit, who set a goal for their giving, on average end up giving 32% more.
Wow.
Which is why we built the platform we did.
It's why goal setting works in general for anything, right?
Exactly.
You actually got to set it down, put it in writing, and do it. Also, I think, sometimes I get pushback from people about the idea of bucketing, about there's more efficient ways to do things and setting up these buckets. But I think behaviorally, Adam, what you're talking about makes a ton of sense. If I bucket this off and I have this set spot, like in my head, which most of my problems investing are between my ears, in my head, I know exactly where my giving is. I feel like even if it's not, quote, the most efficient, and I don't know why in this case it wouldn't be, it just works so well.
Yeah, and there's no question. I mean, bucketing is a form of, as you know, mental accounting that we do. We like to label things. We're humans. Sure, we label things. We give them narrative. We give them stories. This money is for this. This money is for that. And what I teach my students is that it's not a good or bad thing, but it is a powerful thing. You have to respect it. It's a powerful thing. And so if you're going to label money, label it for something that matters. And so if you're going to label this money for retirement or label this money for your children's college education, those are generally good things I'm supportive of because those are meaningful goals for people, right? And labeling gives them more power. And the same thing applies for charity. Most of us, when we support organizations, we care about supporting them. Like I said, if it's your church or synagogue, if it's your child's school, if it's your alma mater, we actually feel bad if we can't make those commitments, if we can't fulfill them. No one likes to say, oh, I can't give this year because of X, Y, Z, or et cetera. And so just recognizing that a goal is important to you, labeling it turns out to have a lot of value because once again, it lets you plan for it, right? When it comes to money, no one likes surprises, right? And money is stressful enough, especially budgets and making sure that you have some put aside for yourself and your loved ones. And so I love the idea in general of extending that to charity and just being honest. And like I said, I recommend most people just look, what did you give to charity last year, right? We do that scramble at the end of the year anyway for those donation receipts for taxes.
It's the last week of the year.
Everyone's searching their Gmail or they have the printed out receipts somewhere on their desk in a folder. But fundamentally, instead of just doing that for taxes, just add up the numbers. And then instead of treating it as a one-off thing, just put aside. We make it very easy for people to put aside money every week or every month, if that's the way you prefer to do it. Some people prefer to do it end of the year, right? We try to rebalance our portfolios. We were just talking about stock. That's the great opportunity. Whenever you rebalance a portfolio, something outperformed, something underperformed, right? Those outperformers, you could sell them to rebalance the portfolio. Those are also good candidates to actually donate and get that great capital. Yeah, exactly.
Donate to rebalance.
Yep.
This is an issue I've heard people in charitable giving talk about that they've had with donor advised funds. And you've heard this before from other places. The latest data I could come up with is 2023. But I like that you started this with, we're charitable, we want to give to a charity. If you put a donor advised fund in the middle of that continuum, you can do it much more efficiently. You can create this bucket that makes it easier. Adam, a lot of people don't start there. They start with, oh, I get the tax break. I'm going to put the money in the donor advised fund. I'm not sure where it's going to go. I'm not sure where I want it to be. And people in charitable giving go, there is, and this is as of 2023, $53.77 billion sitting in donor advised funds that hasn't been allocated. How do we solve this issue that we've got these wonderful charitable organizations that need this money, and we've got these people with donor advised funds that seemingly can't make up their mind, like how I'm gonna disseminate it?
We were talking about myths earlier. I think there's a myth there about
is there good
funds,
okay
because the donation rates out of donor advised funds are so much higher than foundations or other institutions, which are usually keyed around 5%. I mean, at Daffy alone last year, over 38% of the money that had been contributed the year before ended up going out in donations that year.
Wow.
The donations actually move very, very quickly. I do think it depends, though, a little bit on how the software is designed. Does it encourage you to give? But the donation rates are very high. We spend a lot of time talking to nonprofit organizations, and I will tell you, there's some truth to the fact that, look, they're raising money. They'd always prefer some money now. They need money now for their
more
budget.
now, right?
But let's be clear, these institutions, if you really talk to the development officers and the people who run them, what they really need is ongoing support, right? There is a reason why universities have endowments, and why if you want to actually fund a mission or an organization for the long term, you need continuing support. The way I think about donor advised funds is it's kind of like having your own mini endowment where you can, instead of just one off making the decision every year, you can set up a recurring donation so that that organization you support is getting support to pay their people to fund their mission every year, not just the one time they asked you. And I think if you talk to most organizations, one of their top priorities right now is actually just that, is getting recurring support. But once again, to the financial conversation, it's very hard providing recurring support to an organization if you don't fund it. And that means you need an account somewhere. I actually think that more and more organizations are realizing that donor advised funds are the key to them not just getting a one-time donation, but having an ongoing relationship with their donors.
Easier for them to budget then every year, figure out what they got coming in.
Well, listen, I've been on the board of several nonprofits. I will tell you, there's this good news, bad news. Sometimes you get a really big donation. Someone comes through, maybe something meaningful. Maybe they had an event in their life. Maybe someone passed away, but you get this big donation. It actually creates this problem for the organization that they have to deal with, because there's this urgency to try and spend the money now to use it because people want to see that. But actually, the mission of the organization is not just for this year. Like, there's no charity out there who's just focused on 2025. Right? If they're feeding hungry people, they need to feed people in 2026 also, and 2027. And so we really encourage people when they set up their accounts to think about the organizations they support. And instead of just making a one-off donation, we make it very easy to create a recurring donation so that you don't forget. I mean, we are all busy. A lot of things happen in life, family, work, etc. It really is meaningful for most people to know that the organizations that they support, it's going to be on an ongoing basis. And that way they can be more connected.
This goes back, Adam, to behavior, right? I mean, if I've got to remember it, it's not going to happen. If I've got it set up on a recurring basis and then I can adjust it once or twice a year, I think much more likely to happen. I want to ask one more one-on-one question, which is, I move the money to Daffy or I move it to any donor advised fund. A lot of our stackers may not know this. If I haven't chosen where to put it, or I am trying to build that foundation, quote unquote, to build a pile of money, I can invest the money while it's inside the donor advised fund, correct?
That's correct. Actually, different donor advised funds offer different options for doing that. At Daffy, we try to make that very easy for people to do. So, because people have different intentions for the money, right? Like if you plan to give it away very quickly, maybe it belongs in a money market fund or a portfolio of bonds and fixed income. If it's for a longer period of time, a diversified portfolio of index funds might be the right option. Advisors actually love that feature.
Sure.
Really, what we see is that different people have different levels of comfort and different senses of risk when it comes to money that's for charity. Like I said, it's amazing the psychology around money. And we're not judgmental about that, but whatever you prefer, some people want to see that money grow so they have more money to give and they're willing to take more risk with it. Other folks, like I said, this money is for a good cause. I don't want to see $1 lost. And so in general, you can make those choices with a donor advised fund. It's very flexible.
I'm glad you transferred a little bit into Daffy because I do want to talk now specifically about your organization. What was the moment, Adam, that made you go, or you and other people go, you know what, I'm going to start Daffy? Like, where did this come from?
It really struck me one day. I mean, I have 4 children, and they all went to a school where every Friday they brought spare change to their class, put it in a little piggy bank, and they would vote on which charity every quarter to give that money to, which I thought was a great way to teach kids about giving. I mean, if you search Amazon, all the piggy banks, this is the money you can spend, this is the money to save for a rainy day, and this is the money to give. I mean, we care so much about giving that we teach our children about it. I mean, that's
not just a normal... behind you one of those, by the way?
That's right. We do have a piggy bank up here. That's right. Some toys in here.
For people watching the YouTube version of this, you'll see the piggy bank right behind Adam. Yeah.
And so, but it really struck me that It's so important, but all this great technology, think about the number of new financial products in the last 20 years, things to help us save better, spend better, invest better. Where was the product to help us give? And so my co-founder, Alejandro, and I really felt like we could use all this incredible technology the last 10 to 15 years, but instead of focusing it on giving people, excitement when they buy a stock or, you mentioned goal setting, we could use all those same techniques to help people do something good, which is to help them give. And so that's where Daffy was born. We try to keep it simple. I mean, Daffy stands for the Donor Advised Fund for You. It's been a wonderful journey because it turns out to be true. There is so much opportunity to make this easier for people. So many people don't know about the tax benefits. So many people don't realize that they can have the money invested. And to me and my co-founder, that was just in some ways, that was a product problem, right? Like we could build a better product to help people. And so, whether you go to daffy.org, we try to make it easy to get started. You can download the app off the App Store. We even if you want to get a little extra money, even it turns out we will give you an extra $25 if you refer someone to give to the charity of your choice. So these all sound familiar because we've seen them around the web for all these services. I mean, I still spend too much online, so that's
right.
The thing.
But referring people to do the right thing, that's pretty cool.
That's right.
What's the differentiator between Daffy and other donor advised fund platforms?
I mean, there are several, but actually, we talking about the fee is a good one. So one of the biggest differentiators between Daffy and the other services is almost all the other donor advised funds out there are offered by large financial institutions that are investment services. The Fidelities, the Schwabs, the Vanguards. And these are great institutions, but they borrowed their business model from those institutions. So they charge a percentage of assets. I mean, I love Vanguard. I really do. I'm a huge fan of that organization, their products, everything. But even Vanguard charges 60 basis points on their donor advised fund up to $500,000. And by the way, their minimum is $25,000. And
it's a very un-Vanguard-like number.
Well, it turns out if you make that your business model, it creates a little bit of conflict because you're going to go after the largest accounts, right? The truth is the fees off the $1 million account really are about 1,000 times more than $1,000 account. And so we set up Daffy. We looked around the nonprofit sector and said, you know what? A lot of great institutions are built off membership. And so actually Daffy, we don't charge a fee on assets. Instead, we just charge a flat, transparent membership fee. So we're free for under $100. Most of our members pay $3 a month. For families that actually want to involve their children or maybe their siblings or parents or grandparents in giving, we have a family plan at $5 a month. And at the high end, if you really are giving larger amounts of money, we charge $20 a month. And that comes with like the custom portfolio, et cetera. The other big differentiator for us turns out to be just the technology. Right. It's really noticeable, right? It's not just the app in the App Store. We're located in Silicon Valley. We have some of the best engineers and designers out there. So they don't just have to be building the next iPhone or the next social network or anything like that. It turns out you can use those people to actually help build great interfaces to help people give. So I think those are the two biggest differentiators. I will say we have a lot of new features that are unique. We let people do things like send gifts. Right? Like instead of giving someone $100, you can actually send them a gift card where $100 they can give to the charity of their choice. And it comes out of your donor advised fund.
That's cool.
And, most recently we've seen a lot of activity around Daffy campaigns, right? So if instead of giving to your kid's school, you want to say, hey, I'll match $1,000, the next $1,000 that people give to the local school, you can do that right out of your donor advised fund.
We had a stacker. We were recording an episode yesterday that people will hear on Friday, which kind of rounds out this week. And a generous stacker named Paul. Paul wrote me right afterwards, and I could see his Daffy donation to Partnership for the Pathway, which is this pathway building organization to me. He goes, this is just to support you and to do part of my charitable giving this year. I was like, what an honor for everybody.
That's fantastic.
It was so kick-ass. Well, thank you, Paul, by the way.
Yeah. That's our whole philosophy. So we've built Daffy around this basic concept that it's not really about the donor advised fund itself. It's about actually doing what people want to do, which is to be generous and just helping them make that easier to give. And so we, in general, if supporting crypto makes it easier for some people to give, I mean, most institutions don't support crypto still. Right. None of the major donor advised funds do. We support every crypto that Coinbase does. Right. So if you happen to have been in that market, we'll support it. Like I said, the gift cards, the campaigns, we are always using our energy to try, how can we make it easier for people to do the smart financial thing and the most generous thing with their money. And so anyway, I think if you try it, you'll see the difference. But it's, I love that story.
Recently on the show, Jesse Kramer, one of our contributors, was talking about fart coin, and now we know what you can do with all your fart coin. You just donate that away.
I don't have a specific position on that specific asset, but if some of it went to charity, I got to think that's better than some alternatives.
Might be a better use. I know I've kept you longer, Adam, than I promised I would. Do you have time for one more question?
Sure, happy to.
You know, you've thought a lot, clearly, over the last half hour about philanthropy. You could have one dream dinner guest that you're going to talk philanthropy with. Who would that be?
That's a wonderful question. I'm thinking of all these incredibly generous people who've actually built foundations over the years, et cetera, and which ones have stood the test of time and giving. I don't know if I have a specific name, but I will tell you that I've been really fascinated with the giving that happened a little bit more than 100 years ago, where people really set up institutions that we now all depend on. Right? Like generations later, there's that old expression, when's the right time to plant a tree? Well, the right time was 10 years ago. The second best time is today. And so I have that feeling where I see more and more people who really want to have not just impact today, but over very long periods of time, meaningful impact that will help their children, their grandchildren. And there are some of those big donors from 100 years ago who are just they had so much foresight about the institutions they set up. So I apologize, I don't have a specific name, but that's kind of the category that I'm thinking of.
That's fabulous. We were just talking about recently Andrew Carnegie, one of those people.
That's a good example. Yeah. It requires a certain level of thinking, really long-term thinking, which unfortunately we're in maybe short supply these days, to really thinking about not just what's meaningful today or this year, this decade, but what's going to be meaningful on an ongoing basis. I mean, some of the universities that we all treasure and depend on weren't just accidents of history. They were intentional desires to set up institutions that have stood the test of time.
Well, and this gets back to that $53 billion question I asked, and how that can be a driver of, that could just be a sun that gives off heat of so much money to so many organizations. I like your answer to that question. Adam, thank you for mentoring our stackers today on donor advised funds, man. I appreciate the work that you do so much and really appreciate your time.
No, Joe, and I appreciate the podcast and what you're doing, and thanks for having me on.